Autopathography, which is relevantly a new word in the field of research studies. Usually when we look for a topic for research, project work, we go in for traditional ones. Nature in the poetry of romantic times, man-woman relationships in a particular poet, ecosystem in some other. So instead of going for such traditional, conventional topics, the researchers should be on the lookout for new topics, untouched stones. And autopathography is one such untouched stone in literature. It has been recognized as a typical genre only by the 1950s. Before that, we had only doctors' tales. When the doctors write about their treatment experiences, how they met different types of patients and how they interacted with them, etc. Not much of an interaction on the side of allopathy. You know what happens when you go to see an allopathy doctor? I hope the allopathy doctors, if any present here, would forgive me. They will just ask you, usually the people at the front office will take your details like name, age, address, etc., income. They will have a look at your ration cards, then ends your personal history. And then they will just ask you, when did the cough start? When do you have fever usually? Like their usual questions, and they prescribe some medicine in very illegible handwriting, which only medical shop owners can read, and you are just dismissed, the next patient got it. But the very first one, autopathography, first one. Okay, now change it only when I tell you. Okay, so that's the case with the allopathy patients, allopathy doctors, But when you go to an Ayurveda specialist or a homeo specialist, they usually are more keen to know your personal side. How many members in your family have a migraine? Do you have migraine in the family? Are you afraid of darkness? Are you afraid of thieves breaking into your house? So many, what seems irrelevant to you they ask, but from this they are building up your patient narrative. Only alternative systems of medicines do that, but not allopathy. Now, in allopathy, the father of medicine is, as you know, Hippocrates, who insisted on case histories by doctors, not by patients. From then onwards, yes, I'll have to do without it. Just take the next slide. They say well begun is half done. Yes. You see, you are looking at the father of medicine, Hippocrates, who insisted only on case history by doctors. His definition of medical practice never included, it was non-inclusive of patient's tales. And it stifles the patient's own narratives because the focus is on the doctor and the doctor only. The patient never comes to the stage. Only the illness comes to the stage. And let me ask you, what is illness? See, when you are healthy, you live in a sort of, hallucination that you are wanted by people, that you are protected by society, you are secure in your job, etc. But when you have illness, all these illusions are shattered. Because you won't be able to go for a job. Not because of a headache or diarrhea, which will stop in a few days, but if you have some other serious illness, you may have to take long leave. Your friends will be very inquisitive about you in the first few days, and then slowly the phone calls will beat themselves out. And visitors will also slowly leave you, and you will find yourself all alone. That is the feeling of illness. Illness is when you stay away from yourself, if you understand what I mean. You are yourself, you are a particular person, you are a teacher, a student, you are supported by friends, relatives, but when illness comes, you are jolted out of it, as Virginia says, and you will find yourself all alone. And this period of aloneness aids you in a sort of self-discovery. You learn who you are, you learn who your new friends are, your true friends are, and you come upon a sort of auto-discovery where you will know who you really are to them and to you yourself. It's a sort of complicated thing, but if you have anybody near your home or any relative or friend who is suffering from some sort of serious illness, you will know how they feel. They feel that everything is alright with others but not with them, because so far they had everybody around them, but not now, not during the period of illness. So, when the focus was shifted from the doctor to the patient, there emerged the genre of autopathography in the 1950s. It has many names that I have listed in that slide. Patient's tale, medical narratives by patients, sicklet. I find that better, sicklet. It has a sort of charm in it, sicklet. So like that, they have invented many terms, autobiographies, autobiographical narratives of illness or disability. Now when Mathrubhumi published a special edition on this, they asked me to contribute, and I used the term autopathography first, and many people were hearing that term for the first time then. Then Mathrubhumi editor called me and asked me to translate it into Malayalam. And I thought a bit about it, and finally I came up with that term they all liked, and that was Yogatmakatha. Yogam plus Atmakatha, Yogatmakatha. Autopathography is that. So it is actually autobiography plus pathology or pathography. Okay? Now, if you want a technical definition of autopathography, let us go to the next slide. Will it take another half an hour? No. Okay. That is the technical definition by Dungison's Medical Lexicon. The study of the effects of any illness on the writer's or other artist's life or art, or the effects of an artist's life and personality development on his creative work. So they insist on artist or writer because usually mundane people are not supposed to write a book-length study of their illnesses. But usually it is the other way around. As I introduce some autopathographies to you, you will see that some of them are writing for the first time. They never thought they would write, but illness made you aware of their strength. I can control letters, and they also started writing, but this is done in 1853. Davison came up with this definition of autopathography or medical narrative in his medical lexicon. And another very famous person, Susan Sontag, feminist. She had breast cancer and she died of it later, and in her book Illness as Metaphor, she has illustrated that illness is not a mere word, it is a metaphor, a strong metaphor of society and the position of individual within society. Society, as I said in the beginning, surrounds you as a healthy person. But when suddenly you become ill, society acquires a different format. So it can be viewed as a metaphor for society and individuals' positions within it. Usually autopathographies are written only on very serious major terminal illnesses like cancer or neuro problems. You never write an autopathography on headache. You never write one on diarrhea because they are not counted major. So only on major illnesses will autopathography be written. And now, I told you in 1950s the genre of autopathography was realized and then it had a sharp growth. Let us look at the chart. The next slide please. See that? How sharply the chart rises. At first it had very, very few. Literally you can count them on your fingers, but by the time you reach 2000, you see that there is a sharp increase in autopathography. People started writing, their works were being recognized, and naturally autopathography became one of the most established genres of literature in all languages, not only in English. This is from all world languages. Now the question is, why should you write an autopathography? When you have an illness, a major one, a terminal one which will lead you to death, why should you waste time writing about it instead of waiting for death? Very nice question, no? You have illness, you wait instead of write. But then autopathographies have to be written. As we will look at what happened in the genre, the development of the genre, we can trace a sort of pattern in the narrative, the narratology, as well as in the whys and the pros and cons of autopathography. So let us see why the number of autopathographies are sharply written, because the readers feel a need to read them. And why? Why autopathographies? Why should autopathography be written? There are two or rather three valid reasons. One, to communicate with others in order to help them understand what it is like to be a patient and to come to terms with their own illness. What it is like to be a patient. In literature we study about the insider outsider. Only the insider will be able to get a real view of what is going on. You can write about Adivasi problem, the Aborigines, but you will never know what their life is till an Aborigine comes forth and writes it. Otherwise you are looking at an outsider into their problems. But when an insider writes, that's why the women studies have developed. So far men have written about women, now women are writing about themselves, their problems, they are discovering a language of their own. So like that, what it is to be a patient, you should know. Usually when you go and see a patient, you visit a patient, what do? You are entering, imagine yourself long back, when I was a cancer patient, you are coming to see me. So the sight you see me is a bald-headed person, very dark, because everything will go, the eyelashes, the eyebrows, all the hair on your body will disappear because of the chemo, a very miserable figure to look at. I am reclining on the armchair, welcoming you with a weak smile. And what would be your initial reaction? Will you say, you pavam? Or will you say, oh, let us go? These are wrong reactions because you don't know what the patient is passing through. So in order to let other people know what it is to be a patient, the patient has to come out. The patient has to reveal all that goes on in her mind. The patient's journey step by step, so that the social people will be corrected. And also, to come to terms with their own illness. So while doing this, writing the autopathography, the patient is training himself or herself to come to terms with the illness. Second, the desire to remove the stigma associated with diseases such as depression or cancer. In colleges there are counselors. In my college, there were counselors. And when you find a girl depressed, we have tutorial system in our saints. So naturally I will know a girl depressed when I look at her, and I try to talk to her, and then I find that the problem is too complicated. I propose her to the college counselor. She will not go because it's just a stigma. Oh no, I don't want the label of being mad. I'm not mad. Going to a counselor is not madness. We have to get that stigma removed. When I had cancer, I had a servant staying for 7 years at my house, and as soon as she heard the news, she told me, I'm leaving. I said, why? I don't want to stay in a house where a cancer patient is. I said, but you have been with us for so many years. Now don't leave me in this condition. I'm going to take chemotherapy and I will be really unwell, and what will I do? She said, no, my people at home want me to come away. So it's not contagious. Cancer is not contagious. It is not a common cold or coronavirus. So you don't have to be scared of it. She said, no. Because there is a stigma associated with that. Cancer. Oh. She is suffering from the sins of her previous birth. Let her suffer it, face it alone. Why should we be part of it? So that stigma has to be removed. With that, so I have a problem with my throat, that's why. Yeah, so with that, aiming you, they write autopathographies. The third one is a rather selfish one. The patient's own need for emotional or intellectual catharsis. You know what catharsis is, purification of emotions by means of pity or fear. So here, instead of saving themselves from pity and fear, they are writing themselves out, like exorcism. When you are possessed, you exorcise the spirit out of you. So this is a sort of exorcism, when you write it out and everything leaves you as you write it out. Even when, for writing this paper, or rather when this paper I read my Autopathography again, and I was reliving those days of pain and suffering, and it was still a sort of, catharsis, sort of purification. So I always tell my girls, I always tell other people also, whom I think are haughty, just take a visit to RCC, the Regional Cancer Center, see the patient there, and all your haughtiness will leave you. All your selfishness will leave you. Are you frightened? The girls who are leaving the hall? I said leave you and they are leaving the hall. Okay? Anyway, these three are the reasons why people write autopathographies. Now, when you look at the autopathography as a genre and study them, you will see that there are certain stages. I mean, this is the way it should be written, is not a rule. But when you analyze the published autopathographies, critics have come up with a certain cycle, or rather a sort of pattern in their writings. And what are they? Next. First one is denial and anger. The initial reaction would be shock. You never think you will get that illness. You may feel numb, as if you are not feeling any emotion. Then will come disbelief and anxiety. You feel that the diagnosis is wrong. How can I get the disease? You ask other people, how can I get the disease? In fact, this denial is a protective mechanism from the tremendous threat of what will happen if the treatment fails, what will happen to the family, how this will affect my family, etc. So this is the first stage that you can, by analyzing the major autopathography, critics have come up with these stages, and the first stage is denial. When you deny that you cannot have this disease, when you are angry at everyone, you are angry at even the people who love you and support you because you misunderstand their reactions and you become angry. This is a very irrational state. That is the beginning. And the second is misattribution of causes and somatization. You know what somatization is? That is the manifestation of psychological distress by the presentation of physical symptoms. Actually, you are not suffering from any physical disease, but your psychological threat will manifest itself in physical symptoms. you go around saying, I'm not well, I'm not well, I'm not well, but taken to a doctor, but the doctor finds nothing wrong. But you feel, I have dizziness, and I feel I'm feverish, but nothing will be there. You are just finding them because of your mental stress, that is somatization. And this is the time of the why me syndrome. Why me? And there are so many people to get cancer. Why did you choose me, oh God? What a selfish question. But you ask it. Why me? I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't sinned. I am more sinned against than sinning. But then why me? Why did you choose me to have this particular illness, you ask? So this time the patient may feel like identifying the cause. Why? Why did I get this illness? I don't deserve it. I never did anything to merit this. But you gave me this. Why, God? You ask. This is part of the process of the next stage, coming to terms with it. So from denial and anger, you pass through the misattribution of causes. I mean, sometimes people feel, I haven't done anything in this birth. That means, in the previous birth, I might have done something. That is why I am getting it now. You don't know whether there are previous births or future births, but you want to find some cause. And that cause you will find, and then you will feel relaxed. And slowly, how long can you resist? Slowly you come to terms with autopathography. And then, once you come to terms with it, you accept it. And once you accept it, it's easy. Acceptance will lead you to the treatment. The doctor, the treatment will go on. You may have to suffer, sometimes you may not have to suffer, but slowly you will come out of it. And when you come out of it, the final stage, evolution or the change. The change that comes over the patient physically, emotionally, physiologically after treatment. I have a huge circle of cancer survivors. On every February 4th, we meet in Cochin under the initiative of Dr. G.P. Gangadharan, who was my doctor. And there, I have, while talking to the survivors, I have seen that many of them, as I told you earlier, have discovered undiscovered countries within themselves. Like one person said, I have never written a single creative word in my life, but I wrote an article for Manorama or Madhubhumi or Mangalam. I have written that. When they asked me to contribute, I wrote that. Can't believe that I wrote it. So how did the letters yield to her now? How did the creative pen yield to her now? Then there is one person, Edwin, who has started drawing and painting after the disease. And he brought in a very nice, last time, I did not go this time, last time I attended that survivors meet, he brought a huge painting to be gifted to Dr. Gangadharan. The center figure is the crab, symbol of cancer, and then so many faces, starting with miserable one, slightly happier, again happier than that, like that, and the final one with a huge grin, like a smiley. So he was able to do that, like the center figure is Dr. Gangadharan. And then the crabs, and from the crabs these sort of people who just march off. So like that, he was able to discover that, and I learned that he did a solo exhibition of his works at Jahangir Arts Museum in New Delhi. And he said, I never even touched paint before I became unwell. So they discovered something new in them. Some of them become very spiritual. Young persons I have seen who have suddenly become spiritual, reading Ramayana, Bhagavata, Bible or Quran or whatever it is after this illness, not requesting God to save them from further illnesses, but because they feel that they have found their path. So spirituality may be another evolution. Words may be another evolution. Some people, for some sewing may be another evolution. Just patterns, embroidery patterns. So all these have come upon them while they were slowly recovering and were on the path of complete recovery. So, denial and anger, misattribution of causes, coming to terms with it, accepting the disease and evolving out of that. And not only that, sometimes they may develop a wider vision of humanity. Like, earlier when I knew that somebody was suffering from cancer, sometimes, in the family there will be talk, that Vanyama had cancer, Pava, 90-year-old, and she's suffering cancer. And I took the Pava. And then I eat my chapati with relish. I don't think more about it. I watch my TV serial, the soap serial. But now I can't do that. Earlier it was only sympathizing, now it is empathizing. Now I go visit that person. I offer solace, I offer whatever help I can because I find her in my own circle. A wider vision of humanity we develop. If anybody says she or he is suffering from cancer, I feel it is my duty to help them in whatever way I can. That is the evolution that has come upon me. And like that, some people may be involved into social activists. People who never stirred out of their houses suddenly becoming social activists. And there are smaller groups like Ashraya and Thiruvananthapuram where they visit cancer patients and offer them everything from Kannivellam to financial help. So these are society ladies as we teach them, but they have found that their way to humanity is not far off from what they are. So like that, you may evolve into a better being after the illness, and you thank God for giving this illness. The Kundi of Mahabharata, when Krishna asked her, what do you want? Any blessing, any boon? She said, give me more suffering. Kundi is one of the characters in Mahabharata who suffered a lot. But then why more suffering? Because each suffering makes me come closer to you. So give me more suffering so that I will come closer to the real God. So like that there will be evolution, a sort of good change that will come upon the patients. These will be recorded in their autopathographies. Okay. Then let's look at the narrative structure of autopathography. Next slide, please. There is no fixed rule that this should be how autopathography should be written. Some of the examples I am going to introduce you will not be written in this narrative framework, but this is the framework we get when we read autopathographies and we take the common things together. First one is the author's life before or in ignorance of the health condition to come. That is the time before the illness visited the patient. Having a very busy life, enjoying life to the full, then suddenly the illness jolts them out of that. Then the second stage is the first signs of symptoms. Maybe you are discovering some unnatural growth on your body and there is a sense of foreboding, something is going to happen. I must be on my guard. Then diagnosis. Of course you will go to the doctor and you will get it diagnosed. And after passing through the 5 stages mentioned earlier, coming to terms with it, you will go in for treatment. And that is the climax. Your health will go down. There will be crippling fear, an existential anguish in you, etc. And the last one is when the disease is temporarily or permanently put off, the resolution of the condition or establishment of new norms and expectation for life. You can connect it to the classical paradigm of dramatic narrative structure if you are familiar with Hudson. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement and resolution. You know how classical plays are written. Greek theatre, Shakespeare's plays, tragedies, they all follow the same pattern. More or less the same pattern. I don't say there are fixed rules in literature, there cannot be fixed rules. But from the major share of autopathographies, if you analyze them, you can come across this narrative structure. I hope I have made myself clear. If you want to stop me now, you can stop me and ask questions. Or maybe you can wait till I finish and we will have a session together, a chat session. Now, when you come to actual autopathographies written, there are 2 forerunners. Not exactly autopathographies, but they showed the way for the autopathographies to come. When you think of literary imagination and illness, there are so many. Starting from the very first writer to the very last writer now, you can see symptoms of illness, how they affect their literary imagination. Now, the first forerunner of autopathography is somebody whom I had to study when I was a PG student. I don't know whether he is there in your syllabus as well. Thomas Dickinson. And is he being taught now? I don't think so. Confessions of an Opium Eater. Now, this is a very, very strange book because the language is very difficult to follow. It was published in 1822, so naturally you can imagine the English it follows. Now, in part 1, he describes his life as a runaway. In 1802, he ran away from home. As a small boy, he ran away from home. He was thrown into the streets. He himself threw himself into the street, and he was part of the vagabond life and how he was attracted to opium. And the emotional factors, the emotional orphanage that he felt, which drew him to opium. Part 2, he has divided into 2. One is the pleasures of opium, where he describes the years 18, but slowly you become an addict. And once you are an addict, you cannot get out of it even if you want to. And you feel the internal pain. You don't want this life, you want to come out of it, you want to lead a normal life, but then you cannot come out of it. So, that emotional factors that led him to opium are described in part 1. Part 2 was part pleasures of opium. He describes how he enjoyed his opium days. And then in the second part, last part of the book, he described the pains of opium. How he was haunted by nightmares, insomnia, hallucinations, physical problems, and finally how with difficulty he gave up the world of opium and was rehabilitated. So this is not an autopathography in the strict sense of the word, but this is a forerunner of autopathographies to come later. Now the next forerunner is by a writer whom we all know, Virginia Woolf. When you think of Virginia Woolf, you know she was a chronic depressive patient, and she committed suicide because she was suffering from bipolar disorder. She had suicidal inclinations. She had got married to a very good man, but then she found that life is not very good on her, and finally one day she just filled her pocket with stones and jumped into the Thames, committed suicide. At that time her husband was serving her lunch. Her husband placed the lunch on the table and called her Virginia, and there was no answer. He looked around, she could not be found. Finally he ran out of the house and went to the river that was flowing in the back of their room, and he found her hat, her stick and her overcoat on the shore. And he knew she was there inside the water and her body was taken up. I like Virginia Woolf very much. In fact, when I went to see Dr. Panikar for research, I wanted to do research on her, but then he persuaded me out of that. Maybe he thought I will also commit suicide. I really don't know. Anyway, that book, On Being Ill, it has a history of its own. She was 42, very young, when she suffered a nervous breakdown. At that time, her friend whom we all know, T.S. Eliot, do you know him? Yes, your friend also, excellent. Okay, he was editing the British literary magazine, The Criterion. They were very good friends, Virginia Woolf and T.S. Eliot. And T.S. Eliot asked her, as he was coming out of her depressive state from the lunatic asylum, she came out, and he asked her, why don't you write? Why don't you write about your experiences of being ill? And he never thought she would write it immediately. She literally sat down to write it out that night, and she came up with a very lengthy essay. Okay, not a book, very lengthy essay on being ill. And T.S. Eliot immediately published it in the Literary Criterion. Now this book, she begins like this. I read the beginning because that connects you to what I said earlier. Considering how common illness is, how tremendous the spiritual change that it brings, how astonishing. Now listen carefully. When the lights of health go down, the undiscovered countries that are then disclosed. In the light of health, you never notice the undiscovered countries within. When the light of health goes in, the undiscovered countries pop up. And she raised the question, why isn't illness one of the great themes of literature? Love is a great theme. Battle is a great theme. You know the epics, Iliad, Odyssey, Ramayana, Bharata, they are all about wars, battles. Why not illness? Why didn't the writers find illness to be a great theme to write a novel or an epic on? And she finds the answer herself. To hinder the description of illness in literature, there is the poverty of the language. English, very interesting observation, English, which can express the thoughts of Hamlet and the tragedy of Lear, has no word for the shiver and the headache. Can you describe a shiver? Can you describe a headache? You know how beautifully Shakespeare made Hamlet reveal himself on stage through a long series of soliloquies. To be or not to be, that is the question. You know how when King Lear, thrown out of the house by the daughter, stands in the storm, raising his hands and soliloquizing, I am more sinned against than sinning. How more beautifully can you describe those states of mind? But you ask King Lear or Hamlet to describe a shiver. Can you soliloquize to us about your fever? He will not be able to. Shakespeare will not be able to, because English language is poor when it comes to, or any language is poor in that matter, when it comes to describe illnesses. So these two, De Quincey's and Virginia Woolf's books are the forerunners of autopathographies. Now we are coming into full-fledged autopathographies, but before that I must tell you this. Usually doctors will tell you that negativity will induce illness. Negativity will promote illness. They will ask you to be happy. They will ask you to be peaceful. Don't let life affect you. Don't let anything affect you. Because be positive. Because negativity will promote your illness. So there was one patient who looked at the other side of this observation. If negativity can promote illness, will not positivity bring down illness? But when he asked that question, the doctor said, you are a fool. And that man wrote the first full-fledged autopathography. Next slide, please. He was Norman Cousins. No, before that. Please. Norman Cousins. Anatomy of an illness, the book is there, as perceived by the patient, reflections on healing and regeneration. Here how he encountered his illness by laughter and positivity. Now Norman Cousins was a political journalist, and he had to go to Russia in winter time in order to, with some job connected with his profession. And Russian winter is the one that made even Napoleon Bonaparte bow down. So it's something that you cannot fight, Russian winter. So he went there. And he had to work. And he found that he was not feeling well at all, because there were large diesel truck engines working round the clock at each hotel, emitting very poisonous fumes and everything, and the winter outside and the fumes inside the hotel room all affected him, and as a result he got this collagen disease known as ankylosing spondylitis, which is a form of arthritis which primarily affects the spine. Inflammation of the vertebra which will cause huge pain, unsufferable pain, chronic pain. And he left Russia, came back and went to his doctor friend. Friend's name was Dr. William Hitzig, And William Hiswick, after examining him, told him very bluntly that 1 out of every 500 people affected would survive. 1 out of 500, that means 499, the majority will lose their life to this dreadful disease. Will he be the one? Doctor had his own doubts. And the doctor is your friend, that is one trouble, he will tell you bluntly. This doctor bluntly told him, you have no chance of surviving. You will collapse. And then the doctor advised him, but be positive. Be positive, because being negative will only accelerate your journey to death. So he looked at the other side. If negativity can do that to me, why can't positivity help me survive? And the doctor said, I am sorry. Optimism is good, but I cannot support you. Then he thought of surviving out of the disease by reading a bit about it, and he found that the hospital atmosphere is doing him bad. It is true, I remember the first time when I went to RCC for chemotherapy, they gave me a cubicle, and as both of us entered, the nurse came and told my husband, you will have to go buy the medicines. She should have told that earlier. So he didn't want to leave me alone in the cubicle because he was scared what will happen to my mind if I am staying left alone. But then he had to go, nobody else, only we two went there. We left the house as if we were going for a honeymoon. But then to leave me alone in the cubicle, he had his own problems. But then he said, I'll come back as soon as possible, and he left me. Can you imagine? I stayed there alone, all sort of fears coming up. I was trying to overcome no, I won't give in. Then suddenly, from the next cubicle, there was a sound of somebody crying aloud. Oh my God, I can't, take me away, take me away, take me away. And then from another cubicle, somebody was vomiting loud. And then yet from another cubicle, one lady was shouting at a patient. Not a nurse, but a relative. Said, we are all taking care of you, so don't make more trouble for us. Why don't you be quiet? So all this on a lady alone in the cubicle without knowing what is going to happen to her. But then I was saved from that because Dr. Gangadharan sent a survivor to meet me at that time, a young girl from Malappuram. I still remember her. She walked in. She said, are you Chandrika Aunty? I said, yes. Dr. Gangadharan sent me to talk to you. And she sat near me and said, I had 12 chemotherapies, and look at me, what is wrong with me? So you will also survive. And that gave me courage, otherwise I would have given into all these noises from the other patients, other cubicles. So hospital atmosphere can sometimes have a negative impact on you. And this man, Norman Cousins, decided to escape from the hospital. So he told the doctor, I cannot stay here. I am shifting to the hotel nearby. There was a hotel near the hospital, I am shifting. So he went there and he found that there he could keep himself happy by watching Mark films. Very humorous films, like these Walt Disney comics like Tom and Jerry, and their chase going on. Even now, when I am under stress, I watch Tom and Jerry. That will make me happy. So he started watching all those, and you would be surprised to know that when he was being treated for this disease, he was given roughly 38 pills of aspirin every day. Can you imagine? 38 tablets of aspirin. Also, phenylbutazone. They were given, administered daily. These are highly destructive and then promote internal bleeding. He knew that. So, he started administering to himself high doses of vitamin C, which he knew would fight inflammation. And slowly he started petering out the medicines given by his doctor friend. Of course, the doctor friend used to visit him, but then he said, today, my pain is a bit lower than low, so I don't want to have 38 tablets of aspirin, just make it 30. So like that he used to peter it down. And he used to read humorous books like F.B. White's Subtreasury of American Humor. He used to laugh himself, and the vitamin C administered by himself, and also this reading humorous books, watching Marx Brothers. Slowly he stopped all the allopathic medicines. and he was feeling better. Okay? And this is the finding I listed at the end. 10 minutes of hearty laughter can give 2 hours of painless sleep. 10 minutes of hearty, you shake your belly and laugh, and you will get 2 hours of painless sleep. So when I came up with this theory to the doctor said, I don't believe that, but anyway, you are lucky, that is why you survived. And then he wrote this book and published it. And what happened? The entire medical field turned against him for promoting rubbish. No, don't promote this because all other people will follow your example and the mortality rates will go up, he said. But then he was a living proof of what he practiced, what he believed he practiced, and he survived. He who had only 1 out of 500 chances of surviving lived up to the age of 75. And when he died, it was not of arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis. He had a sudden cardiac arrest in 1990 and he left the world blissfully after proving to the world that with positivity you can face even terminal diseases. So this is one autopathography which you can advise. If there is anything people in your knowledge, you can ask them to read. They will get a lot of positivity. Now the next one I am going to tell you is about, the next autopathography I am going to introduce to you is about a lady who evolved into a spiritual being after her illness, and that is Nathamani, a feminist historian, cultural critic, contemplative writer, filmmaker. She had an MA in comparative world history, PhD in history of consciousness. She was teaching on the faculty of women's studies in the University of California when she had an accident. A Pepsi truck ran into her car. Pepsi is unlucky, unhealthy also. And this Pepsi truck ran into her car, crashed, and she had a wound on her, clot on her head, which gave her blessed her, gifted her with a stroke. So she was led into the world of illness and disability. She was bedridden for 4 years. For 4 years she could not even move. Attended on by home nurses. As she was lying there, the second is her book, the third is her friend who led her out of the disease. Do you remember her? Saw her anywhere? She is Durga. So as she was lying prostrate, unable to move, other people doing everything for her, she one day suddenly had a hallucination of somebody calling her, come inside yourself. I am inside. You come. Don't look for sympathy outside. If you have some problem, you write to your friend, you write to your teacher, you write to your mother, you write to your relatives. Finally what happened, they spread it all over the country. And you are still where you are. So the only one person to confess is to your faith, your God, whoever it is. So she felt that Jagannatha, as she calls her in the book Ruminations, calling her to take a journey inwards, and she did that. And finally she knew, one day Jagannatha asked her, you can get up, try moving your hand, try moving your leg. The physiotherapists were also telling her, but from within the command came and she was able to move and she got up. Then she could move about, yet she could not go to the university or teach because she still was an invalid. And after coming out of it, she became a normal person. She could go to teach, and now she is very healthy, again active in the world of movies, and she goes around reading from her autopathography, ruminations on interleaves, ruminations on illness and spiritual life. So spirituality helped her come out of it. I am a strong believer in God. I have prayed, other people have prayed for me, And I believe that prayers have helped also. But then, there are people who don't believe in God who have also survived. Best example is my friend Guripuja Sri Kumar, the poet, who said he had a hearty laugh when after the chemotherapy the nurse told him, "Sir, your prayers are answered." And when the last biopsy result came and the doctor said, "You are out of it, your prayers have been answered." And he said, "To whom did I pray? I don't believe there is any God." So, who was the God? As Radhamani says, inside. The God was inside. You are good being. Virtue, Nanma. The virtue inside you is your God. If you don't believe in God, Lord is just an energy that keeps you going. And Buddha had believed in that, but not in God. So, whether you believe in God or not, your faith will help you get out of your illness. Is it time for me to stop? Yeah? Okay. Now, I'll just hurry through the rest. Virginia, there is no word in English language to describe pain, but let us have just a look at how Radhamani describes pain. Pain is like this. Pain throbs, pain shreds, pain darts, pain weaves life patterns across the length and breadth of the body. Pain stabs, pain pulses, pain plummets the body into a vortex unknown, and at times fearful, pain nags. I can relate to that. That's exactly how I too felt. Pain just winding itself from the head to toe. So she has found words to describe it, though not very poetic, because as I said, when you are in pain, the last thing in one's mind is finding the right words to make poetry out of one's suffering. It's not possible, but then she tried to describe her pain. Okay? For her, personally, political and spiritual. So the process of recovery changed her perception. She had a palpable sense of being whole. So far she thought of herself as a successful person, movie maker, orator, faculty in California, etc., etc. Suddenly illness, and she was all alone. People visited her first, then they stopped visiting her. And then that was the time when the call from within came, and she evolved into a better person. And you can see her happiness in the previous slide, there was her picture. Then the next one, next slide, R.M. Lala, who wrote his famous book, Celebration of the Cells, where he fought cancer with positivity and determination. He was a Parsi author, editor, publisher, and he was strongly associated with J.R.D. Tata, and he had written the Chronicles of Tata family. And one day, when he was looking at the mirror, he noticed one side of his neck was slightly enlarged than the other. He was getting cancer of the lymph nodes, which he didn't know. When the biopsy results came, he was upset. But then he had a strong supporter, J.R.D. Tata, very wealthy man. So he sent him to the United States. He survived and came back. Then again cancer came. Again he was sent to United States, survived and came back. Again he had cancer. So 4 or 5 or 6 times he had cancer, but every time he came back. But money will not help you in that. Money is of course a good factor because it helps you procure best treatment. But then your positivity. When you read his book, you will understand. The first part is in the form of epistolary. He is writing letters, a series of letters to a person who refuses to go for chemotherapy, a young girl. And in the second part, he gives a lot of religious quotes, which should be helpful, thought for a day, like that, a series of thoughts. Otherwise, that book is also traditionally not autopathography, but then it is very helpful for patient because, as I said, the 3 intentions of autopathography are fulfilled in this book. Now the next one is, you see that, Bruce Taylor, you see those 2 beautiful kids, they are twins. And when they were 3 years old, The twins were 3 years old when he was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in his thigh bone. So till then he was a very successful person, American TV person, anchor, author of 15 books. But then once he had the severe pain in his thigh bone and it was diagnosed as severe osteosarcoma, he was worried about his twin daughters who are only 3 years old. Who is going to help them? So he wrote to 6 people in his life to help be a father to the daughters. He said, my daughters will have plenty of opportunities in their lives. They will have loving families, they will have each other, but they may not have me. They may not have their dad. Will you help be their dad? And all the 6 of them agreed, and he formed the Council of Dads with good guidelines. And what happened was he survived. He had a 15-hour long surgery on his thigh bone. He was on crutches for a year and a half. Then he had to walk on cane for a year, 500 hours of physical therapy, and now he walks around with a very minor limp and he does his duties again. But then once he came out of the life, he did not forget his past. He knew he had a mission. Why did this disease come upon me? And he started working for the children of the cancer survivors or cancer affected people, forming councils of dads. Councils of dads in different parts of America to help the children of cancer-stricken people. Now that has become a strong supportive group in the US, and his autopathography is also named the Council of Dads. My daughter is my illness and a long subtitle. Okay. And the next one is, let's say I'm trespassing into the next person's time, so I have to stop. Anup Kumar, The Joy of Cancer. Now, Anup Kumar was a postgraduate in nuclear physics from Delhi University. He was working in advertising agency, and he used to smoke 30 to 40 cigarettes per day. So you can imagine, nowadays when you go to watch a movie, you know the first advertisement is how they squeeze the lungs and take out those fearful juice. Lung juice. So he used to smoke 30 to 40 cigarettes in a day. And he left his job and he was about to go to Gulf countries to take up a new job. And for the visa, he had to undergo a medical checkup. And in that medical checkup, it was discovered that he was suffering from lung cancer, stage 4. You know, cancer has 4 stages, from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, good chances of survival. 0 is almost papilloma, benign tumors. 1 and 2 have good chances of survival. 3, 50-50, 4 means you are gone. So he had stage 4 cancer, and but he was not down. He did not take it as a death sentence on him. He fought it with his positivity, and he came out of it, and he wrote The Joy of Cancer. But after the publication of that autopathography, he got cancer again. So I can personally relate to him. I got my attack of cancer. I published my autopathography. I got my second attack of cancer. So I added the second experiences as the last 2 chapters in the first autopathography when it came out in the new edition. But he did not add that. Instead, he found a 7-point battle plan against cancer to help the cancer patient. I have written them there. You can read them. Visualizing your way to health. Imagination helps you a lot. You accept the disease, choose the doctor with care, think only positively, make sure of support, set your goal, visualize the way to health, and then after survival even control your diet. My doctor has asked me to stay away from red meat. Don't eat red meat. That was no problem for me because I never ate red meat. Even now I don't. He said if you want chicken you can have it once a week. But I'm not very particular. Now I'm even thinking of stopping the fish. Because, no, not because it will get cancer and use it, but I don't want it. I want to become a vegetarian. Now the next one is someone whom doctors will not like. That is Michael Tosh. Living Proof, a Medical Mutiny is the name of his Autopathography. Now he was a tutor at St. Catherine's College, Oxford for 35 years, okay? And I must mention a word about him as a teacher before I go into Autopathography. He never liked the teachers who ignored classroom teaching. He found that his colleagues always went for seminars, they were doing clerical work, and all the texts they had to cover they were giving to students as assignments and seminar topics, and no classroom teaching. And he never liked that, so he decided, I don't want promotion. I don't want promotion, I'll be a good teacher. He concentrated on classroom teaching, he never went for any seminar, he never published any paper, and he was liked by the entire campus. The teachers, the students liked it, and he was making a huge sacrifice, you should understand. The career he was sacrificing to be of help to the students. But then somehow he got cancer. And though he never published a research paper, the only book he published was his Autopathography. That was an instant success, The Living Mutiny. And he was diagnosed with myeloma, cancer of the bone marrow, in 1994. And the doctor said, you have only 6 months to live. And the doctor told him, it cannot be cured, but we will start the treatment. You see that? It cannot be cured, but we will start the treatment. And he asked himself, if it cannot be cured, why should I subject myself to this horrible treatment? And he started asking so many doctors the question, and all the doctors said, no, you have to have a painless death. So for that, at least you succumb to treatment. And he said, but chemotherapy is horrible. Radiation is more horrible. Why should I? If there is 1% chance of survival, I would have. So he decided to walk out of the hospital. And he tried alternative treatments. The one treatment that supposedly worked in him was Gerson therapy. It's a very exhausting regime consisting of, I have written it there, 12 freshly made vegetable juices a day. You know how difficult it is to make one juice per day. There are 12 freshly made, you cannot keep them in the refrigerator. 12 freshly made vegetable juices, high dose vitamin injections, acupuncture. Regarding the medical prognosis, he survived for the further 11 years. Doctor said only 4 months to live, but he survived for 11 more years. And when he actually died, he died from a blood infection, not from cancer. Okay, we began the lecture with Virginia Woolf's Autopathography on being ill, which is not an autopathography strictly. So now the last one I say is also not an autopathography strictly, but I have to say it, otherwise I'll be sort of not doing my duty properly, and that is Young Dominic Bobby. You may be familiar with the film on his Autopathography, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, a memoir of life and death. He was a journalist, very handsome person, naturally haunted by ladies. His wife left him maybe because of that, but he had other love affairs, 2 children he had. On December 8, 1995, he had an abrupt massive stroke, and he was in coma for 20 days. When he opened his eyes, he found that he could not move any part of his body except the left eyelid. Only the left eyelid he could move. Okay? And a speech therapist came to teach him the silent alphabet. I have defined it there. And Claude Mendible, a trained nurse, used to visit him every day to help him write the Autopathography. The silent alphabet involved blinking his left eyelid to depict the letters of the word. That is, Claude Mendible will come with papers and pen and ask him, shall we begin? He would blink his left eyelid. Is it letter A? And if he blinks, Yes, it is A. If he does not blink, it is no. So she will give him a lot of words with A. And, is it and? Again, waiting for the blink. So like that, you know how strenuous it is to write an autopathography like that. She was also extremely patient and he was also very humorous, even with the blinking of the left eye. He cracked jokes, made her laugh. She had written about it. It was very touching to talk about him even. So Mendible spent 3 hours, 6 days a week taking dictation, and it took him 200,000 blinks to complete the book. And the book came out in French, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. 2 days later it came out in French, he died. So it was as if he was keeping himself alive to see the book. The book was published, the first copy shown to him. In 2 days' time, he drifted off to death. And the title, you should see that movie. It's a very short movie, but it's very heart-rending movie. The title is, the diving bell. You know what a diving bell is? Trapped in his body, he visualizes himself as being within a deep-sea diving suit. Diving suit that you wear when you go into the deep sea with a brass helmet. So he thinks he is like that, but his spirit is like a butterfly. Even though he is trapped within the diving bell, his spirit moves freely like a butterfly. It is called locked-in syndrome, LIS for short. Locked in, your spirit is locked inside your body and you cannot move. That is the most pitiable thing. Once I remember, I took my students and visited the lunatic asylum in Thiruvananthapuram, and there we found 2 ladies crying for no reason. Crying, very pathetically crying. They want to come out of it, but they can't. They were also inside the diving bell. He was in the diving bell and he wanted to get out of it, he couldn't, but the spirit was fluttering about a very pitiable condition. Okay. And last but not the least, Atma-Prashamsa Dina Ishtala. No, yes, that one. My own autopathography. Nyandigalda Naatiloru Idavela, which was made into a film by Nivin Kohli, etc. So can you just go before that? No, after that. Next one is, I don't know, before after. Why should autopathography be right? I am coming to the end of the paper. Readers are able to view how individuals cope with unexpected and unchosen life circumstances. Narrative can restore equilibrium and restructure life expectations. Readers may hope to learn something from the experience of those who have faced the front lines of existential battlefield and returned at least long enough to write their autopathography. Okay. It can be a tool for doctors to gain insight into patient experiences. When I was diagnosed with cancer, my doctor, Dr. D.P. Gangadharan, told me, when you come out of it, you should write about it. I said, if I come out of it, I will. He said, you will come out of it, I am very sure. So I came out of it, I wrote the book and I dedicated it to him. Okay, next one. It is just a reading list. Most of them I have mentioned in my talk. So you see that illness is a time when you are away from yourself for a while. And the best thing you can do is to make the best out of that. Anyway, it is given. So there is no use fighting and making other people more miserable. If you cope with it in the best way you can with laughter and positivity, you will come out of it and you will become an example for many others to follow. That is the only advice I can give you. And with that, I thank every person who is responsible for inviting me here. I hope you have liked the lecture. Thank you very much.